So since we are the last panel, definitely not the least, because we do have a very important word in our panel discussion topic, which is action. So we talked a lot about philosophies, we talked a lot about wish list. So what have we done so far to take action? And how can we promote and motivate more people to take more action? So maybe I can start by asking the panelists here today to share about your work. Eileen, I know you are the head of HR for CLP, large conglomerate. What kind of, and we talked a lot about competencies. Just now the panelists talked about courage, integrity, creativity, things that are not really judgeable by assessments, right? But really necessary in the real world. So from your perspective, what kind of competencies are the most important? And what has CLP done to engage students or even other stakeholders within the state education field to develop these competencies for the next generation?
Thank you very much. I think the competencies that we've spoken much today about the competencies, and certainly what we see in CLP is that everything we've spoken about today, creativity, resilience, openness to change, are critical competencies or critical capabilities that young people will need to have going forward in Hong Kong. What we're doing as a company is reaching down, so through all of our programs from management development right down into what we're doing in schools, is embedding those kind of competencies and creating opportunities for young people to develop them. We have programs that range from our flagship graduate trainee programs for people who've come through the university system, a new digital trainee program. But we also have other programs that reach down into schools, our engineering in schools program that aims to give people exposure to our industry and also to some of those new skills and competencies. I wanted to highlight a couple of things, though, that we've came up in the last panel that are certainly very important to us as a company, and I think also important to Hong Kong's future. We have incredibly strong secondary education, and it creates a very, very competent, very skilled set of young people who come through the university system. 2/3 of Hong Kong school children don't make it that far. And we need all of them to address the talent gap that we have going forward. We need all of them to participate fully in Hong Kong's job market going forward and to feel like they have hope for the future. We have fantastic developments, Northern Metropolis coming. Yeah. We have to turn Hong Kong and create every electric vehicle, to create every vehicle to be an electric vehicle. We have to connect all of that. There are jobs galore for young people, but we need to build their skills. So we run the CLP Power Academy, which is specifically for people who are coming through a vocational path, who might have missed out on school the first time round, didn't see a future for themselves, and then come back to learning and want to participate down the track. And we would love to feel not only that can be expanded more broadly within Hong Kong, but also that we can touch those young people who perhaps don't go down the university path, but there's 2/3 of our young people who fit into that category. The other thing is for young people who want to pursue careers to feel like all careers are open to them. And so we do a lot of work with women in engineering also to help them feel that they can participate and right down into school that's a career path for them going forward. And so I think that's incredibly important to Hong Kong. We've got a looming 10-15% gap in our workforce going forward. We have to fill it, so we have to find opportunities for all of these young people to feel like they've got a part to play. So I think companies can play a huge role in that, but also the education system can encourage people to find a different pathway if it's not university. Yeah,
very nice. Thank you, Eileen. We'll come back to you later because we've heard that CLP has done a lot of good initiatives, especially engaging the education field. But what can we do from a policy-making perspective to encourage more companies to be like CLP? So we'll come back to Eileen later. Dr. Check, yeah. So you are a really committed member of the Rotary. which is a global establishment offering lots of educational opportunities to under-resourced students. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do and what kind of initiatives has Rotary pioneered, and what are your future aspirations in this regard?
Thank you, Jennifer. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to talk with all the experts in education. First of all, Rotary is comprises of professionals. We have community leaders. The diversity is much, and one of our focus is to nurture our next generation. And youth service is one of our main focus. And I can quote an example, is the Interact clubs. We have around 90 Interact clubs in Hong Kong with the secondary schools. We would like to convey our core values to them, especially diversity, fellowship, service, and leadership, and integrity. And apart from all the skills, I think that the core values is very important. If we are talking about education, if many of the previous speakers, they also mentioned about integrity. So apart from those core values, we also would like to promote international understanding to all of the kids. And especially, our Rotary clubs will sponsor those kids to overseas trip for exchange, to, for example, to Osaka. We have also Interact clubs in Osaka. So the kids can exchange, and they can learn about the Japanese culture. This is one of the examples. And another very good example recently is that we collaborate with Cyberport. We have a Smart Park Challenge competition. We invite secondary school students, university students to use their creativity to have the proposal to have a sustainability, the Smart Park proposal to us. So these are some of the few examples that Rotary would like to pursue. And one of the main motto of us is we are people of action. Just we can echo the last speaker that we like to take action. So please join us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Check. And I'll come back later to ask Dr. Check more about how you outreach, how do you identify which schools to reach out to. Professor May Chang, thank you for joining us today. You are representing arguably the most important stakeholder we have discussed today, which is the teachers. Teachers, trainers, faculty members, all the panelists previously have talked about how overwhelmed, actually, the faculty often is at school, but at the same time, they are the most important people who can daily inspire our next generation. So as a chair professor of teacher education of the Education University of Hong Kong, what kind of innovative or unique learning opportunities has your organization extended to the teachers to get them future ready so they can get the next generation to be future ready?
Well, that's a lot of responsibility that we are having at the moment. For teacher education programs, we have a kind of a motto for us for the university. We call it the PRNI. That is the PE meaning professional excellence, and ER meaning ethical responsibility, and NI meaning innovation. And so we try to design our programs in a way that they would meet the learning objectives of preparing the teachers to become professionally competent. And then nowadays we also emphasize a lot on ethical responsibility that they have for themselves, for the school, as well as for the students that they are teaching. And then the last part, or not the least, is innovation. So we do encourage our students or the teachers to become innovative through the program, and we encourage them to put into practice what they have learned. And so for all the programs that we are offering, we provide students with hands-on experience. It's not only doing micro-teaching in the university, but they do have to go into classrooms, and we emphasize a lot on, we call them the teaching practice. And so there are 2 semesters that our students are going out for teaching in schools, either in primary, secondary, or some of them are going in early childhood settings as well. Apart from teacher education programs, we also offer other programs, like they are not going to become teachers. For those programs, we also offer internship, and we encourage our students to identify for themselves a career pathway that they are going to pursue after their graduation. So very early on in the program, they do need to think about what they're going to do. For example, if it's a Bachelor of Arts degree, which is a general degree, so the students also have to think about what they're going to do after their graduation, and they have to develop the relevant skills during the internship. And in the programs that we are offering for all the courses, we encourage our teachers not only, the lecturers in the university, that they are not only teaching the theory, but at times they would also invite the practitioners, either from the school or from the industry or from different types of organization, to be guest speakers, to share their experience. And some of the courses are also co-taught by industry people. Like recently, we are offering courses on IT and AI. And so we also invite people from industry to help to co-teach, because they are the frontline people, and so they have the first-hand knowledge or the experience to share with our students, which is more, we think is very important, that they have both the theory and as well as the experience and know what's happening in the real world other than outside the university. And so these are the things that we have been emphasizing. And the last part is service learning, which we heard earlier on in the last few panels, that we try to inspire our students to think about real-world problems, and then design the way of trying to help people with solving these problems. For example, in one of the courses, our students will go to elderly homes and teach the elderly how to use the electronic device, like how to Google or how to use the internet or how to play around with an iPad, etc. So these are some of the services that they have been trying to come up with. So they do need to have the heart for caring about the elderly, as well as having the knowledge to know how to teach and communicate to an elderly person, and have the patience as well during as they provide the service. So these are the 3 things that we have been emphasizing in our program. So service learning, theory and practice, as well as internship.
Well, these initiatives sound amazing, highly interdisciplinary, real-world relevant, and really kind of skill and mindset-based as well. But just echoing the earlier panelists who talked about the stress that teachers are under, I'll come back to you later to say, give and take, right? We seem to be giving more to the teachers to learn. So what should we do with the policymakers or even school leadership to give them the space that we talked a lot about for them to grow intrinsically? So Claire, thank you for joining us today as well. And from your background, having led so many talent development initiatives in multinational corporates all over the world, from UK, Europe, Middle East, and now Asia Pacific, and knowing that our generation of Hong Kong students will very likely travel out of Hong Kong if they have not already, and some of them will come back to Hong Kong, hopefully. Do you see any discrepancies or differences between talents in these regions? And does that inform your talent development initiatives differently, depending on geographic and jurisdictions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, I just want to say thank you. I know it's been a long afternoon, but I've learned a lot listening and been thinking about all sorts of things, so thank you for the opportunity. So it's very, very important that we don't generalize. It's very easy, and I know, some people say don't use the S word, Singapore versus Hong Kong. If I can just generalize for the moment to answer your question, I think that students coming through, the people we hire here, very diligent, very hardworking, very committed, smart, which take them a long way. But I think if I can give some commentary around areas of difference, perhaps we need to find a way in the system to encourage the young in Hong Kong to be more confident to challenge and question. When I think about the world of work today, when all of us were starting our education, we probably all had the question of what are you going to do when you leave university? What are you going to do when you grow up? Jobs that exist today, we didn't know existed 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We don't know what jobs are going to be in 2 years' time, 5 years' time. We can't ask that question. But what we can ask is that people who come through the education system have some key competencies, as Eileen has mentioned. And I think of them as the 4 C's. So critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and change management. It's still dealing with change, but change management makes it 4 C's. And those 4 things, those 4 competencies, I think, give someone confidence to deal with the unknown. And I think also give confidence to work in the environment that we're in today. And when I think about, as you said earlier, people leaving Hong Kong have opportunities elsewhere, hopefully will come back. But even if they don't, with this virtual world and how we work today, so much is done online and virtually or in hybrid. And if you have an individual who hasn't got confidence, who doesn't proactively ask a question online in a forum with others from around the world, they'll get left behind. And then you add on top of that an Asia culture dimension, you add on that a gender dimension, so you have your female, I'm generalizing, your female Asian Hong Konger, quiet, diligent, hardworking, quite smart, but gets left behind because someone else is more confident to put up their hand, ask questions, and challenge. And I think that's what we need to build through the education system, and that's what we look for when we hire, is those competencies versus the grades.
I love change management. I think all of us here have achieved a PhD over the past few years in different contexts. But I think for students in particular, especially when the Asian culture is so honed in on rote kind of assessments, no change is good, right? Because otherwise you won't get the score. And that kind of mindset and skill sets differentiation is something we need to bridge. Great. So Claire, coming back to, Eileen, coming back to you. I think it's great that corporates are doing so much. In fact, even with CTF Education Group, we are part of the larger ecosystem of New World and access to 20-something industries. And last year, we established the World of Work Institute, basically synergizing all these different industries ecosystem with the K-12 education. But I don't think many companies in Hong Kong are doing this. What do you think we should propose to the policymakers? If there are any government officials here, or EDB, or school leadership, what can we propose to them to encourage more companies to give back to the K-12 education?
I think we've seen some of it already, but I think there's more we can do. I was reflecting, listening to all the speakers today, that we've got a big ship to turn here, right? And the ship doesn't turn quickly. So to make a difference in the kind of competency building that we're talking about, it's a 10-year journey, 15-year journey. But then right now, we can see that we must do it, and for all the reasons that we've discussed. And so then if you have that in mind, you say, well, to make a difference in 10 years, I then need to see green shoots in 5, and that means we need to start doing something in the next year or 2. Otherwise, nothing will happen in 10 years' time. So that's what my big sort of reflection was today. We've had the, well, let's call it the benefit of some of the most difficult times that any of us have ever experienced in the last 3 years. And so another reflection today was Winston Churchill's quote about never let a good crisis go to waste. Or something like that. Maybe I've paraphrased it. Something like that. Anyway, never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm not saying we've had a crisis, but this is a more or less, right? And so we can use this opportunity and the challenges that Hong Kong faces to mobilize people, I think, a lot more. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we were coming out of 2019 and all of those difficulties, and then we had the pandemic on top of it, we realized, many companies realized, that there was a whole year of people graduating from university who had nowhere to go. And many, many companies banded together also with the support of the General Chamber of Commerce to create internship programs, and there was an initial intention to create 160 internships, and then there was 1,600 internships. So companies can do it if we've got something to kind of mobilize around and really push. And so that's just for people graduating from universities. So if I would say one thing came out of today, it's a little bit more urgency.
Well,
we actually don't have time.
yeah.
So this is something where it's about the policymakers, I think, can leverage their power as government and leverage their influence over the broader community and get some things going.
Yeah, actually, the chief executive has done something quite good.
Yes.
Right, like the 2000 mentorship program for the
Absolutely.
students, really getting them that real-world exposure. Charleston talked a lot about, hands-on experience and real-world experiential. But I'm just wondering whether, if the government could give some incentives to companies, right? A bit of tax break or something, but they have to commit practitioners to go and train the trainers. Right? Because now we have a global shortage of teachers or educators in general, and actually industry practitioners, when they get to a certain level, they're the best teachers because they actually start wanting to teach and they have to mentor their juniors anyways. Can they mentor teachers, right? So maybe I'll just come back to Dr. Chak in a bit because since we're talking about faculty and teachers, maybe I'll go to Professor Cheng. What do you think of that idea, practitioners and teachers? Because teachers, as I said just now, the more training we give them, the more overwhelmed they could be, right? So how do you think we can reduce their workload? Giving policymakers some suggestions, and how can we leverage them to also help the faculty?
Well, about teachers' workload in schools, you mean, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to look at the curriculum, like releasing curriculum time. We have been asking teachers to cover quite a lot of curriculum, and we've been adding onto it like STEM elements. We add onto it AI. We add onto it coding, computational thinking. We add onto it data literacy, and then computer literacy, and all these different types of literacy and data analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of these new elements like STEM or STEAM activities are actually carried out in a school during extracurricular times. And a lot of my projects, when we work with schools, and I offer to school teachers, can we collaborate on a STEM lesson or a STEM activity or a STEM project for our students? Then their response would be saying that, how much time will you need? Is it 10 lessons or 5 lessons? And most of the time they would tell me that I cannot do it in the regular lessons because it's only 40 minutes or so. And many of these activities take over an hour. And it has to last for not only one lesson, but over a period of time. And so they would ask me to do it during extracurricular time. And some of those activities are also carried out during the post-exam activities. Like the kids have nothing much to do after their exam, and they're waiting for the results to come out before the summer holidays. And so that's the time that we are doing a lot of STEM projects. And so maybe we need to rethink what should be put into the curriculum and what should we be releasing from it from time to time. And I just heard this morning in another symposium from a colleague in mainland China is that what they're doing with STEM is that they would ask the schools to release at least 10% of their curriculum time to do interdisciplinary teaching. And so this means that they are not teaching the regular physics, chemistry, biology, but they would then be asking the teachers to use the time to do interdisciplinary work. And so that would mean for them STEM. So 10% is the minimum. And so some of the schools might go up the percentage to a higher percentage. So this is the first thing we need to look at is curriculum time. What should be inside or outside? And how do we cope with the addition of an endless list of things that we need our children to develop without giving up some of them? And then the second thing we need to look at is some of the panelists have talked about earlier on is about assessment. Like STEM projects, they are not always successful. And so how would we assess the students if those projects are not successful or we are not looking at the outcome of the project? So the assessment may well be looking at the process or the efforts that the students have put in, the questions that they ask instead of the answers that they are giving you. And so this might be encouraging the students to provide questions instead of trying to guess what's the right answer that the teacher is asking for. So we need to rethink what should we be assessing. And another, the third point I want to talk about is about the teachers collecting homework at the bus stop. So we need really to think about, do we need to do so much homework? Is it a policy there, or is it because of the expectation of the quality assurance mechanism that we have in place in the school, that teachers have to complete so much dictation, so much homework and worksheets per year or per school term? So those expectations might need to be revisited, or we need to rethink what should we count as homework. Like, would the STEM project be counted as a homework instead of the teacher collecting pieces and pieces of paper? So would the teachers be collecting an output or a product? And that can be counted as homework. So this might be some of the ways that we can rethink.
I think just like a lot of education-related dilemmas, we're opening up another can of worms for discussion, because once you move away from quantitative evaluations, there'll be the whole discussion on fairness and qualitative judgment and benchmark. But thank you so much for the sharing. Dr. Chak, so Rotary, can you share with us where you get the funding from, are there any initiatives to policymakers can help get more funding, and how do you identify what kind of schools and segment of students that you should extend your programs to? Because you're talking about service and integrity, and these are really important things. Yeah. But for a lot of Hong Kong students and parents, they feel like, well, get your grades first, then you can have an entry ticket to university, then you can talk about character, because otherwise you don't really have a job to showcase your character. So the question then is, the two questions is funding and how to motivate policymakers to help with the funding, and also how do you identify the right target pool.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, for the funding, actually there are two kinds of fundings, mostly. We Rotarians, we will donate, and then and we also collaborate with big corporation. For example, during my year in 2020, during the pandemic, we collaborate with some of the big company. We tell them that we are going to give out laptop and also tablet to those underprivileged kids, secondary school students. As the previous panel already talked about, they don't have enough devices during the times that most of the students need to have online lessons to do their homeworks. And another major source of funding is that we donate to our foundation, and then we can get back from the foundation. We call it the Rotary Foundation. We can have a very good resources from that foundation. We have a global grant project. For example, in the past, here our chair, Sarah, she is one of our scholars. And we provide a scholarship for her to study abroad. And so it's the same, that we are collaborate with many NGOs, for example, Bảo良局. And we have a global grant project with them. We do a STEM project in the past year. And then we benefit those kids in Tin Shui Wai, the north part of Hong Kong. And these are most of the methods that we can have the funding, for our beneficiary.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what about the, maybe I'll move on to Claire first, because I have a big question for you. Given your background, you've worked in multinational companies, and we have representatives here from private and listed companies, also NGOs, and you have also founded a lot of charities yourself. So how do you see, how can we encourage more collaboration between private sector and public sector to drive this kind of movement to educate the next generation?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as I was listening, thinking what else can we do? You know, you sort of start feeling, as you said, Eileen, you know, there's not enough time and we should be doing more. I think that, you know, having more opportunities to experience, because otherwise it becomes quite theoretical and academic. And as I said, the pace of change is so great that, you know, describing work, describing roles, describing opportunities become out of date once you've written it all down. So I wonder whether there's more opportunities for us to create more interaction, whether it's mentoring, whether it's shadowing, whether it's, you know, going in early, as was said in the earlier panel, you know, going in early at the primary school, we have internships. Most companies have internships, but they're probably late secondary, university. Maybe we should be thinking about earlier on to help individual students think about what they're interested in, because, you know, how would they know what they, I mean, you know, the world is so hectic. How would they know? So maybe there's more we could do early on with primary school students to get them into the world of work. What is it like to be in an office? Do I like that environment? Is that something that really I think I could be excited about? And so on. And then mentoring, as you said, you know, there are a number of, the Women's Foundation do a great job here. Other things we could do around mentoring and particularly around encouraging people to follow their passion versus doing something that they know will get a grade and a job is so important. And I know that's easy to say when there's so many pressures on life, but I think something around encouraging that freedom to do something that you're passionate about, in the end will pay dividends.
Yeah, from my perspective, is under CTFEG, we also do both, of course, you know, our operations, our school operations, and also a lot of charitable initiatives. So we often think about, you know, all companies now have the community outreach component, but oftentimes their focus is perhaps on environmental, you know, social governance related issues, and they're very, very important. But if policymakers could actually, you know, encourage more companies to think about education and actually, you know, put a part of their CSR donation or funding into education kind of initiatives, surely the return on impact would be multiple folds because you're impacting people, and we precisely need people and talent in the future. So last question, we have a few minutes. We have talked a lot about students learning, faculty, how companies can help, policymakers, what can they do to enact change. We haven't really talked that much about parents, because we did touch upon it, you know, earlier in the first panel, and they talked about passion and all that. But ultimately, parents, what do you think we can do in education, industry, or as a general society to impact parents' mindset? In fact, it's probably harder to change parents' mindset than students. Any thoughts?
I'm a parent of a 21 years old man, and 16 years old, and 13 years old. And in my philosophy,
looking very young, this father.
In my philosophy, I would like to let them decide, encourage what they like to do, and of course, I would like to know more about what is going on. So, for example, one of my kids, she's in Malvern, and they have a very good system using the IT that I can take a look of what is going on, the project, what is done by my daughter, and I feel it is quite good that you can engage parents because now these days the parents are so busy. I may not be able to attend all the things, the events in school, but I can still do it online. Yeah, that is a very good approach. Yeah.
So parent engagement. I actually feel sometimes, we always talk about passion and really encouraging them to seek their own path, right? But I think this is a luxury. A lot of the under-resourced students, the parents are like, I really need you to get into this university and do this job because you need to feed the rest of the family maybe in 10 years' time. Yeah. So, and sometimes we're really thinking about how can we make changes to even the universities' intake of students. How do they benchmark as success, and how do they actually quantify things that are not easily quantifiable, things like integrity, community mindset? Because ultimately parents are result oriented. They do want to get them into something, a next stage. So if we can align that mentality, it would automatically align parents' mindset. So anyways, that's just my thoughts. Any other thoughts from Claire, Eileen?
Well, I can
Professor
add in
Chen?
just quickly, I'm not a parent. Many nieces and nephews and godchildren, and one thing I do worry about is the level of stress in kids and parents today, and we haven't really touched on that topic. But I think that parents or families, if I say extended families, can do two things. One is, I think, instill some core values in the family, because, as I said, change is a common theme, and if you can root yourself in your values, you can deal with everything that's thrown at you. And parents, don't know everything that's going on outside their unit, but they do know their children. So I think instill values in the kids, number one. And number two, I think we could do more to think about how some of those competencies can be gained. And I'm a big fan of sport. And I think if we could encourage children to participate in sports, particularly team sports, they learn a lot of the things we've been talking about. And, we know in other in other systems, when you apply, whether you apply for a job, whether you apply for university, whether you apply, your resume, they're not just looking at their grades, they're looking at, were you in a team, what sports, what position did you play? Because that all tells you something about the individual. And I think if there's some way here in Hong Kong we can weave that into, and not call it extra curriculum, because then it's extra. Yeah. I don't think it's extra, I think it's core. That will maybe start building that new, that base strength that we need.
I think there's also a real collaboration that can come between the school, parents and children to help educate parents, and I include myself, right, in not only what some of these new skills are that the children need to learn and develop, in understanding the impact of the pandemic situation in the last 3 years on our children. And I think we can all see it anecdotally, but perhaps don't always have the skills to help understand what's going on and how we address it. And then also to educate ourselves on some of the future careers and opportunities that may come, because what we grew up with and the traditional path is really, really changing. And so I think there's a lot that can be done in the kind of triangle between school, parents and children to help educate, and it's incumbent upon us parents to be part of that process and grow ourselves and grow our own skills to help as part of this.
Well, I think schools may need to think a lot more about parent education and parent engagement. And nowadays in our program, we do have courses on parent education and parent engagement, or how to communicate or interact with parents. So this is a huge subject for teachers as well as for school principals. And some people in Hong Kong also say that, well, do we need a license to be a parent? Actually, there is quite a lot to learn if you want to really do the job well. That is to learn a lot more about psychology, child development, and imagining that the students nowadays are not going through the same school system that we have gone through like 20, 30 years ago. And so what they are learning in school and how schools are looking like might a bit different, or if not a lot different, is quite different. I remember one of the panelists just said today that the textbook looks the same, but actually the teachers' book are very different. And the teachers behind the stage are using a lot of technological innovations. Like they go into online learning, games, and how to help students to develop new skills like coding and working on STEM activities. So actually a lot is happening behind the stage, although we still ask the students to buy a textbook. And that might be one thing that they are still doing to satisfy the parents. And surprisingly, the parents are not satisfied at all by looking at the same textbook. Why is it the same? This is the same textbook that I have when I was a kid. But actually, what is happening at the backstage is quite different nowadays. And how the teachers are going about with assessment and motivating students to learn, and all this we are expecting the teachers to do in preparing for the lessons is quite different from many years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to all our panelists today. And since time is up, I shall wrap up. I think it does take a village to raise a kid, maybe not a village, the whole world, to raise our children. And I think today we've heard a lot from companies, NGOs, faculty leadership, and global network, how we can help our next generation. So thank you so much.